Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 8, Episode 10, Ultimatum. But before we get started, as always, please make sure you watch the episode first on roosterteeth.com to support the show and avoid spoilers. We're back at it again for a new episode discussion after an extended wait following the snowstorm in Texas. Much love, by the way, to all those still coping over there. And jumping quickly into the fandom spotlight, we have folks like Fireheart47 sharing a compelling case to explain why Jin wasn't upset about being summoned without a question. Meanwhile, Jamarcus Davis gave plaudits for how Emerald's reaction to Hazel saving her was handled, perhaps the first time she's ever had someone go so far for her sake. And speaking of Big Daddy Hazel, Stoneman made note of Amity Arena's high praise for the Titan, which feels more than accurate than ever following him going toe-to-toe with Salem. Now, while this latest pause was definitely understandable, it thankfully didn't lessen the anticipation amongst fans for the new chapter, with many of us still kept on the edge of our seats wondering what would follow on from our heroes barely managing to survive their first clash with Salem. Adding to that was the fact that we had to sit on another painful cliffhanger that left us with more questions than answers. And with so much that could still unravel before we reached the volume's climax, did I feel the fallout from this dramatic confrontation do right by what came beforehand? Let's find out. Well, before that, even before the episode begins proper, we had a viewer discretion warning regarding flashing lights in the episode that could be harmful to photosensitive viewers. First time we've had something like this in an episode, and it did add to the tension a little bit, making me wonder at least what could cause such visuals. But besides that, good on the RWBY for making sure folks were warned ahead of time. As to what causes those flashing lights, well, we'll find out in a bit, as the episode truly starts with Ironwood in his office, looking proper stern-faced as he watches the battlefield from afar. It's a simple but effective shot, embodying the general's resolute focus on nothing but the enemy that's been swarming his every fort for a while now, and the slow flybys of the airships into the dark storm adds to the depressing tone of James sending whatever forces he has to the fight in what looks like an unwinnable battle. Ironwood is also receiving word about Cinder busting into the prison to rescue Watts, and we get confirmation that Jacques did survive the blast, though James doesn't give a damn about the guy compared to more important matters, which, fair. What does concern Ironwood though is the whereabouts of Crow and Robin, who after a bit of Metal Gear Solid takedowns and the world's fastest chokehold, are still on the run, prompting the ever-increasingly frustrated general to order a lockdown and no interruptions until they're both back in custody. James is really starting to lose his composure with every new roadblock getting in his way, and the fact that even the rank and file are now growing nervous around him makes a point to tell us that the cracks are growing in Atlas's shield, the more the military's commander is letting his emotions get the better of him. Of course, him wanting to be alone also makes it all the more likely that we will see Crow confront him, leading to the two coming to blows, which should definitely be a hotly contested bout, I'm sure. But until then, just as Ironwood regains his focus to the battle outside, a massive burst of light rips through the scene and a giant bolt of lightning strikes Monstra, the resulting explosion sending shockwaves all across Atlas as the war zone, the main city, and even the Schnee Manor get enveloped in the blinding light. Guess that explains the flashing lights warning, huh? And what a light show it was! Big shoutouts to the particle and lighting effects team for how well they sell the magnitude of this blast with that bright light just swarming every single scene, and the way the explosive dome just expands across the kingdom in a scale that none of us have seen in the series prior. I especially love the shot that we get right here at Ground Zero as we see Winter and the Aesops mid-bomb transport suddenly get blown away by the blast, the dissolving effect around some of their models further amplifying just how powerful this sudden burst is, and how impactful it must have felt to be caught in the blast zone. Visually striking stuff, and a hell of a way to kickstart the episode We can assume what caused this blast based on how the last episode ended, but I will discuss that in more detail later on. As for now though, once the blast has evaporated, we see that the mighty monster is now a rotting corpse, complete with visible ribcage, which is proper gnarly stuff. Not only that, the skies are now filled with dust and the dying embers of Salem's grim army, with the orange hues of the rising sun giving the whole scene a somber yet still unsettling aura amongst all the carnage. Surely then, this tattered battlefield must be the perfect backdrop for a nice leisurely stroll, as in amongst the dust we spot Neo with Jin's lamp in hand skipping away from the wreckage. And somehow, she's not the only person who survived the blast, as the Atlas elites made it out alive too, albeit a tad roughed up and stunned at what just transpired. My later talk on what caused this blast will also be where I discuss how these lot could still be alive, but I will say that I would have liked them to have a little bit more damage to them considering how close they were, at least to add to how destructive that explosion was, since it was enough to send them flying into a newly formed crater. Marrow, however, isn't concerned about himself right now, but rather the fates of Jean, Ren and Yang, believing the trio may not have gotten out of the whale in time before it went up in smoke. A harrowing thought on the lad and Winter, who is no doubt processing that she may indeed have to tell her sister that 3 of her friends died, and she was partly to blame. As they all head back under General Ironwood's orders, who by the way does not know that the blast wasn't because of the bomb, we do see other soldiers join them, so it's not just the elites that made it out okay. But we can't tell if Team Funky are amongst them, which is concerning. Though if I had to guess, I would imagine Flint and Neon would be okay, as they are fan favourites that would be a shame to lose here. As for Cobalt and Ivory, well, they're not really established at this point as characters, so they could be easily discarded for now, as sad and kind of morbid as that sounds. Within the dust-ridden city, we then spot Cinder and Watts, who are having no luck contacting any of their allies, assuming they all died in the blast. And now it's just the 2 of them who need to think of a new plan while waiting for Salem to revive herself. Of course, Cinder is being Cinder, and she's sticking with her plan to steal the Winter Maiden power from Penny by force, with the aid of Watts' hacking. Except, there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. See, Cinder believed that Watts could simply control Penny and bring her to them, but as Watts clarifies, the virus that he implanted only has Penny under control in the sense that he forced a set plan into a system that would force Penny to go to the vault, open it, and then terminate herself. And even though Watts is slightly worried that Penny may have withstood the virus for the moment, he feels it's only a matter of time till she succumbs, and the staff will be theirs. Thing is, that last step of the plan isn't exactly happy hearing for Cinder, who grabs Watts and shares her anger that he's risking the Maiden power being lost before she could steal it. Thing is, Cinder's own goals matter little to Watts, who beyond his distaste for the Vixen, has always followed Salem's plans. And though he doesn't outright say it, the fact that it's Salem's plans that includes Penny's death without Cinder's goals in mind should tell her how false the Wicked Witch's promises to support her truly was. But alas, all that's on Cinder's mind right now is pure rage, as she hangs Watts over the high building, opting to take advantage of Salem not being around, to disapprove of her killing Watts, before then going to the vault and waiting for Penny there for finally taking what she feels is hers. And then, Watts' pleas turns to laughter, cause it's time for another round of roasting Cinder, as the Mad Doctor just tears into Cinder's lust for power and how it's constantly ended up biting her in the backside, in a tirade that's been long coming. First, he brings up the fact that she thought she could just storm into Freya's room and outmatch 2 of Ironwood's top fighters by herself, only to lose the Winter Maiden power to Penny. And then he recalls her deviation from their plans way back in Mistral when, in spite of Watts' words of warning, Cinder struck a risky deal with Raven in a foolish effort to get vengeance on her enemies that ended with her beaten and cast aside. Even in the face of death, Watts can't help himself but see humor in Cinder once again letting her single-minded, reckless desires charter a path that's likely gonna end with her defeated, and the only one to blame for it would be, much like those past failures, hers. As Watts is just going full bore with his ranting, Cinder is getting more and more pissed as we see the blood-red stained memories of these moments flash in her mind, and this helps us understand her recollection as well as give us a nice little reminder of just how far she is falling so many times. And one of those days also include her torture under the Madam, and Watts believes that because of that suffering, she may be deserving a little bit, but she's not worthy of the power that she's so desperate to claim, and in fact she's nothing more than a bloody migraine. Again, this has been a moment long in the making, as we finally see someone force Cinder to face the fact that she's the source of her own failures. The same rage and desire that is so strong in her fueling to move forward is also what's making her blind to overconfidence and, all the fact that she's kind of eating her own foot sometimes. And it's a verbal smackdown that's wonderfully performed as well by Christopher Sabat. The guy's acting ability is highly respected for a reason, as he adds the perfect amount of vitriol and smugness that really makes some of Watts' comments sting all the harsher. Like Watts wants Cinder to know full well he is enjoying getting to mock her perhaps one last time before she kills him, thinking in the end she's only going to continue her boneheaded car crash mentality. And you can tell, even beyond the memory visuals, that the Doctor's insults are landing their mark, as Cinder's anger causes her to summon a Maidenado, something that we've seen in the past used by maidens as a reactive shield to physical harm. Except here, it's Cinder's power reacting in response to emotional harm. And it doesn't work, as just when it looks like Cinder's gonna let Watts go, she relents, pulling him back to the roof before she walks away without a word and sits on the side before shedding a tear. This perfectly caps off the scene with the best outcome it could give Cinder's character, to give her the fresh starting line for development that she's been in dire need of for some time. Volume 8 has already done her big favours in finally shining a light on what's fueled her path of destruction, but without this harsh dose of reality, she always ran the risk of being, yes, a dangerous villain, but one that never really grew from her losses in a way that would help her remain a viable and compelling threat that can match the ongoing growth of the heroes. And while this slap to the face doesn't garner any sympathy from me, it does make me much more invested in her story, because now we should be set to see Cinder with a focus to her mindset to match her power, a grounded realization that she needs to be smarter and not just rely on brute strength. I don't bank on Cinder at this point seeing the error of her ways in the sense of becoming a good guy, but rather a villain with the wherewithal to be more tactical, more composed, and more than aware that she's not invincible and not due a win, which I think makes her all the more engrossing a character. What can a Cinder, with her head no longer swamped by pride and overconfidence, accomplish when that's been the one thing leading to her biggest L's? That curiosity excites me, and if handled well moving forward, we could see Cinder reach her fullest potential as a villain with actual dimensions to her beyond that of a power-mad destiny chaser. And if that's the case, then I think we have this terrific scene to thank for that. It's about time then to check in on their heroes, as it also turns out they managed to survive the blast too. Though we do also see John quickly aid in Oscar's aura healing, even with him casting the blast from the safety of his green bubble. It does seem that the farm boy needs a lift up. And hey, Blake finally called Yang, the cat girl noticeably concerned for Yang and the others' safety. And the lot at the manor savor knowing that their friends are okay before sending them directions to reach them through the subways. There's one other face amongst them though. Emerald, who's rather crestfallen amongst all the royal wreckage, and it dawns on her that Hazel did indeed seem to sacrifice his life to make sure that she made it out okay, and the loss of one of the few people who actually cared about her definitely wounds Emerald deeply. And personally, yeah, I do believe that Hazel is legit dead, and I would be very shocked if he survives somehow. Yes, no body, no death is a thing brought up before in past RWBY deaths, but not only was he holding Salem, who seems to be out of commission for a little while, the dude was also on fire and struggling to deal with the overdose of the dust that he injected in himself. He's immune to feeling pain, but not immune to the injuries causing the pain, ultimately killing him. Plus, it does feel more fitting for the character that his final moments was a last stand effort to make up for where he strayed. Cut to later on as the group are heading through the train tunnels, and the topic of Emerald being trusted as a potential ally splits the heroes. Yang and Jean not exactly open to the idea of letting someone who was integral to much of their grief and the fall of Beacon work alongside them, which again is totally fair, while Ren and Oscar are suggesting that even if they don't forgive her, she still should be given a chance of a redemption, or at least a chance to do some good. Though even Emerald herself isn't exactly hot to the notion of getting a second chance regardless. She's not fond of any of them as much as they are with her, and she implies that she just wants out of this mess altogether rather than remain caught up in the fighting. But what does her deeper feelings say? We see Ren's repressed emotions sensing ability come into play once again, and this time we're seeing purple petals, which is kinda tricky to nail down what they mean. Purple is often viewed as a regal colour symbolic for wealth or mystery, and that doesn't exactly fit the scene here, so it could be a mixture of red anger and blue sadness, which could tie back into a heartache losing Hazel and hatred for Salem that, if she admitted, could inspire her to wanting to help the others try and fight her. Purple does also represent devotion, which could mean she's thinking about Cinder, or considering the present scene, maybe it's meant to symbolize regret. She has been one of the villains with some semblance of a moral code with some of the schemes that she's been involved in, like back in Volume 3, and her reaction to the Beacon chaos. So, who knows, maybe she's still yet to truly admit that she does regret her part in Salem's plans. Nonetheless, tension is thick on this current subject of trust, and when Oscar vouches for her, noting that they already got support recently from someone that they also don't exactly trust fully right now, Ren catches on that he means Ozpin. I wonder if he caught on by Oscar's words, his repressed emotions within suggesting that he's hiding something, or perhaps that he could see an additional petal spiral hinting that Ozpin was out of his seclusion. Either way, I like that it's Ren who spots this first, as another small example of the lad becoming more emotionally aware since his breaking out of his slump. And with this out in the open, Oscar pleads that Ozpin can be trusted too, as he took the blows for him while captive, and he himself put in trust in Oscar, allowing him to use the Long Memory's ace in the hole to aid their escape. This is where that blast from earlier comes into the discussion, and it turns out to have been a blast made by kinetic energy that was stored within the cane, energy that has been built up over Ozpin's many lifetimes until the time was right to use it. We finally had the cane's true potential brought to light, and I can definitely say I didn't expect it to be stored up power capable of creating an energy nuke. And yet, while this may seem like a bit of an ass pull power, especially when Oscar also has Ozpin's magic to count on, it is worth remembering that back in Volume 5, Ozpin shared that the power that he has in his magic is growing weaker, especially after using it to create the Maiden powers and turn the Brown Winds into birds. I think it's perfectly logical then for Ozpin to look for a backup means of power that he can make stronger without risking it draining. Thus, kinetic energy, power gained from potential active movement, like perhaps the very gears within the cane's hilt. So, all in all, it's a surprise that I do think makes sense within the character's motivations. Going back to the other topic of how the major faces would survive the blast while the Grimm didn't, I think one excuse for that could be Oscar using magic alongside the kinetic energy. After all, we did see green and yellow flickers mixed together when Oscar was charging the blast, so that lightning bolt could very well be a magically called upon strike with the power to wipe out Monstra and the surrounding Grimm, but tempered by magic control that lessened the damage for any humans, at least beyond any harm from the explosion itself. That, I will admit, is a bit of a stretch, but it's the best excuse I can think of based on what we've seen, without just assuming that the heroes are lucky that most of them have important character immunity. What's interesting regardless is that Oscar notes there's still some energy left, so who knows how that could come into play later on. I also think it's worth noting that Emerald looked back during this discussion, so she's listening in for sure, and depending on where the next step for her arc takes her, could she try to snatch the cane and use the energy herself for some reason? But one last element I do want to praise here is how the writers respected the mixed emotions from all parties, and it didn't force everyone to comply with each other instantly without addressing the bumps along the way. Oscar accepting Yang and Jean can't forgive Emerald, Emerald's own admission for her dislike of the heroes, and the confliction on counting on Ozpin's plans aren't overlooked for the sake of bringing everyone on the same page right away when they can still make for appealing conflicts worth exploring. Also, to really drive home the point that it's important these lot make the right choices, the sound of baby crying is alerting the gang to their arrival at the station platforms, where most everyone in Atlas is hiding. And much like the remarkable blast visuals and the striking scale of the building fallout shots, the sheer size of this crowd shot is quite impressive, perhaps the largest sustained crowd scene in the series, and even with some of the basic clothing designs helping out, the crowds are decently varied, and it does feel like a truly massive city population is stuck here desperate for protection, painting quite the heavy picture of just how perilous things are for everyone in the kingdom, not just folks in Mantle. Everyone's in need of support, and with Ironwood in a dark place, even the very people he's adamant about protecting are struggling, and perhaps this could be a clear-cut example to Emerald of what she's involved in to put her feelings into perspective. She may want out of this whole grand fight, but she can do much more good lending her skills to defend the world rather than getting out of dodge, especially as someone who was once like some of these lots, alone and vulnerable, until someone was willing to give them aid. Back in Ironwood's office, the elites finally arrive and clarify that the blast wasn't from their bomb. James's confusion soon passing for how this could still be to his benefit, especially with Penny, still yet to arrive at the vault, and the escapees on the run. Which especially pisses off Harriet, who, if not for Ironwood, would have gone off after them. We're definitely seeing more seeds planted for Harriet and Robin as well to clash alongside Crow and Ironwood, and I'm very eager to see these two bouts take place, especially with what could transpire from the two ladies. Not only do I expect it to be a flashy contest, I can't help but picture that Robin's semblance could finally force Harriet to admit to herself everything she's bottled up, like her feelings over Tortuga and Clover's deaths, her frustrations with coming up short versus the students, and her true feelings on the General's orders. Speaking of the General, his ever-increasing paranoia and lack of composure is really breaking through when he talks about needing to get Penny back while Salem is out of action for the moment. The shrunken pupils, the rising desperation in his voice, the man is very close to having a full-on breakdown, and the warning signs continue when he asks for Jean, Ren and Yang. See, with once his plans seemingly turning up fruitless, James is now looking for a more surefire way to make Penny come back. So instead of trying to manipulate her robotic side, he instead aims to manipulate her human side by bartering the lives of her friends in exchange for her return. And this for me is where James goes from full-on grazing the edge of the moral line to taking his first step over it. The man who once believed that Ozpin's child students weren't ready to be involved in a war or even try to win it, is now threatening harm to kids just to force Penny's hand. And what's even more unsettling is just the casual way he talks about such a plan. Massive props to Jason Rose here, who wonderfully balances a soothing, almost delighted tone in the General's voice with an uneasy arrogance and tension-heavy presence, truly making me feel creeped out and fearful that he finds the idea of not thinking about leveraging people's lives earlier humorous. Jason does his absolute best to sell Ironwood's warped thought process and confidence to perfection. He really does believe he's doing the right thing and the moral issues aren't as bad as it actually sounds, all the while patting Winter on the shoulder while he talks about such twisted plans. And the atmosphere grows even more heavy when Harriet spills the beans that, sadly, they don't have the prisoners anymore thanks to Winter letting them go. Nobody likes a tattletale, Harriet, and if this is despite Winter for that "I outrank you" line from earlier, then now's really not the time. Not to mention she didn't exactly go into full detail about the situation, though let's be honest, I don't think that would change Ironwood's reaction. Pure disbelief and betrayal that his most trusted ally, the person he told at the start of this volume he has no idea what he'd do without, went against his orders and has now robbed him again of another plan for Atlas to survive. And you can cut the tension with a knife, it's so heavy right now. Top job with the expressions here to really ramp up the atmosphere even more, with the close-up on James's eyes more than selling just how furious he feels, and Winter's look of utter panic and worry is simply brilliant, especially if you imagine this may be similar to how she would have felt under Jacques' thumb, the same feeling of fear, toxicity and weakness, but magnified knowing that this risky play by her could very well lead to a bit more than whatever punishment her father could have given her in the past. And guess what? It gets even worse! After a massive outburst wrecking his table in anger, Ironwood's then informed of incoming ships, and part of me first wondered if this was going to be the other kingdoms finally arriving to help. Except it's actually the SDC ships sent to Mantle to aid in the evacuations. And Ironwood, believing that this is Weiss's idea, starts to chuckle at the thought of what to do with something involving Mantle. And again, props to Jason for another well done delivery here, but you can already tell that what Ironwood's gonna do next won't be pretty. In the meantime, we get another bit with Watts and Cinder, who receives a text from Neo saying, "Give me what you owe me," implying aid in killing and getting payback on RWBY, "and I will give you the lamp and the means to use it." First off, God, I love smug Neo. Even through text, she's the true master of sass. Secondly, I also love that profile picture, as it looks like Cinder sneakily took Neo's picture without her consent. I swear that sounds like prime Ruby Chibi skit material. And thirdly, well, I guess that shoots down any theories of Neo asking about Roman. Nope, she only wanted the lamp as a means to get to RWBY, so we still have to worry about that issue as well, especially now that Cinder could very well be fighting with a much different mindset this time. On the note of Little Red, we finally see her and the rest of the heroes reunite back at the manor. Sure, in terms of the actual timeline, it's only been a day, but they've all been through so much in that day, and after a less than positive split up, it's just wholesome to see them all together again, especially these two with their adorably sweet embrace that fits both girls and needs little to be said to explain just how much they both missed each other. Honestly, all the reunions are sweet as heck and feel fitting to each bond. Jean and RWBY holding hands, their care between the two leaders always being equal, and Yang and Weiss having a more mature but still tender embrace for a pair that over time has grown stronger together as they drop their guards to be more open with each other. And of course, there's the reunion with Blake, which boy hasn't this sparked quite a reaction on several fronts. Obviously myself and other fans of the ship loved it to bits, and even if you don't ship them, it's hard to argue against it being a beautifully sincere moment of comfort between the two. But the most pressing topic out of this is whether or not this should have been the moment we finally get a kiss. Now, I won't lie, it certainly looked like we were gonna get it with the way the scene is shot right up before the head boop. And for a lot of people, they feel that this was a missed opportunity, or worse, a rough bit of baiting, which I don't agree with. In terms of my opinion, I can at least agree that if the two did kiss here, it would make sense in its own way. The two have been growing closer, with more hints to their blossoming feelings. Their time apart has also showed that they were concerned not just for the other's safety, but also if not being on the same page back in the premiere would cause division, and so truly brewing on their relationship right now while apart would make them think that the next time I'm gonna see them, I think maybe now's the time to come clean and be open with my feelings with a kiss. That would feel like the next logical step to their developments. However, I can also see why the RWBY didn't pull the trigger now, for much of the same reasons why they didn't after killing Adam. It was a moment of comfort and relief. In the Adam scene, both just overcame their demon. Blake was dealing with the fact that she had to kill her former partner, and Yang was making sure that Blake was okay while acknowledging her promise to not run away by hugging her, and the two sharing a touch of heads to symbolize their togetherness in that moment. You could argue a kiss would have been just as good to cap off that scene as well there, but at the same time, having such a personal moment come after killing a guy would feel a tad ill-fitting tone-wise, and for the emotions at play as well, it would be a bit off. A kiss wasn't essential in that moment. That's what I feel about this scene too, as it was another moment of the two finding comfort and safety in each other above anything else. Heck, I would say their embrace being far more romantically flavoured than the hugs that Yang had with RWBY or Weiss does say enough for now about their deeper feelings, especially since you could probably say head boops have become their personal gesture after doing so back at the Falls. I could also see the RWBY wanting their first kiss to be given enough time and focus to just be about that, without anything distracting that landmark moment, considering what follows this. And to the people that countered this claim that said, well, Ren and Nora's kiss got followed by something big and tragic there, what's stopping this scene? I would counter that with the massacre that followed soon after their kiss benefited Ren and Nora's relationship narrative as it pushed them into their next developments, whereas here, the events that transpire after a kiss scene here would have made Blake and Yang's focus be a bit off, considering that their focus would be on overcoming that trial ahead rather than what impact it coming after their kiss would have on their relationship. Again, if they did kiss, I would be all for it, and I would get why now was a fitting time to an extent. But just cause it could have happened doesn't mean that it should, nor does the lack of a kiss invalidate the moment still having enough of a romantic, comforting edge to it in the expressions and embrace, especially considering this is a very slow burn romance. We will get a kiss scene at some point, I'm sure, and at this point it's clear the RWBY do want to do it when the scene's context works in its favour. On the mention of Ren, he asks about Nora, and I like that it was Weiss who was the one that goes to him ready to explain things, given that she's been tending to her. A small but sweet gesture there, and though we don't get it in this episode, I'm excited to see that reunion go down, and how the pair respond to each other after their recent personal introspections. We do sadly missed out on one more hug as well, for poor Oscar, who was denied one with RWBY when she spots Emerald is with them. Glad to see RWBY does get pissed at the sight of her though, as much like Yang and Jean, it's understandable that she would feel this way given the thief's key role in much of her suffering. Though now we've got these two together, this is definitely going to make Cinder hunting RWBY down very soon all the more interesting, should Emerald once again try to talk her out of working for Salem. If Cinder feels that Emerald is going to get between her and her goals, will she decide to be done with her? Or will she be more open to her warnings after what's caused her to think more rationally? Maybe Emerald finally learns that she stands very low in terms of Cinder's importance, and she starts to think that maybe hunting for the power is only going to get her killed, so she's the one that maybe chooses to cut ties. And then we get to the big stuff, as suddenly May is calling up about something happening to the ships, with Caden also doing a banger of a job selling the sudden shift to sheer panic as the call ends right as she starts yelling at people to run to the mines. And at that point, it starts to become clear what's happening, and the rapid fall into dread goes to a nosedive when alarms start to ring out from everyone's scrolls, By the way, nice attention to detail on Blake's ears hurting here, and we see a news broadcast show the ships are being attacked by the military, robbing the folks stuck in Mantle of their last hope for rescue. And this vile act is thanks to one man, General James Ironwood, who next appears looking like a proper tyrant with no shame, blank-faced in a lone spotlight while he flat out steals the episode with one of the most heartbreaking yet shocking impactful moments in the show. I am not kidding when everything about this scene is simply perfect, as Ironwood proclaims to all of how he always did his best to protect the kingdom and its future, that his forces have halted their enemy for now, but only one person is stopping Atlas from truly surviving this fight: the protector of Mantle, Penny. Oh, the absolute cheek of this man to say that when 1. His army hasn't stopped Salem's forces, yet he's claiming it as his own win. 2. He barely put in a decent effort to protect Mantle at all. And 3. The fact that this dude just broadcast how his own forces is stopping Mantle being evacuated, when he stands to lose nothing from them being taken to safety. Yet he clearly doesn't care about how he's viewed right now. If I'm to be seen as a tyrant for doing what I believe is right to do, then so be it. That is his mindset, and he pushes the envelope even further when delivering his ultimatum. Penny has to come back to the base, open the vault, and aid Atlas's escape, leaving Mantle to fend for herself, or he will force her hand by removing Mantle from the equation with the bomb. Yep, in thinking that the only reason the heroes won't work with him is cause of Mantle, he's willing to nuke the city so the heroes would have no reason to side against him anymore, essentially forcing them a choice of complying no matter what, and Mantle will die to either the Grim or by his hand, so long as Atlas survives. It's finally happened. After years of build-up, many moments highlighting that James often lacks a heart, only focusing on achieving victory through strength, and slowly seeing the man lose his composure to fear and desperation, the Tin Man has finally turned his heart cold as steel. And it's a turn that's both tragic and striking, as well as monumental and expertly delivered. This has been the crossing of the line that many of us have speculated on and feared, and we finally got it with a disgusting moment of pure spite and heartless cruelty. The guy's so blind to his warped paranoid ideals that he thinks after blowing up rescue ships and threatening to nuke a city that the heroes will give up and Penny will comply to his orders without conflict. That's just how far removed he is from the morals of a stable, considerate man. And everything from the lighting, the emotionless facial animations, the chilling score piece, and Jason once again knocking it out of the park with his monotone yet threatening voice, it's all I could ask for in truly capturing just how broken the General has become, and how dangerous this new threat is for the heroes to deal with, even after just dealing with bloodthirsty demon dogs and the literal Wicked Witch. It's a superbly executed payoff to creating James Ironwood the emotionless general, and how fitting is it too that it's via a bomb threat, cause the dude's been a ticking time bomb since his debut, slowly losing more of his sanity and humanity with each reckless plan that blows up in his face. One other thing that we also didn't see was Winter or the Aesops in this scene, so we don't know yet if Winter got punished for disobeying Ironwood, nor do we see the reactions of the group for his new direction and plans. She started to think about breaking free while she can, unless she tries to talk sense one more time to James, which might very well lead to some very troubling outcomes if he decides to be done with her for good. And as for the elites, I imagine that Harriet will stay loyal with Robin and Crow's arrest still on her mind. As for Vine, Elm and Marrow, the latter two I could see try to break away as well. Vine's the only one I'm unsure on. But suffice to say, Ironwood's actions are definitely going to send ripple effects across the kingdom, and how it affects the chances of survival and the reactions of the cast. I can say this much at least with good faith, it's a hell of a way to close out a chapter that was bookended by two massive moments of shock and awe that left me breathless. The opening scene, literally exploding with life, does leave some head scratches on how some folks survived, but beyond that, it perfectly set the tone for the episode's dark and terrifying nature, and was one of the many visually stunning set pieces across the episode. I came out of this episode really admiring just the sense of scale at what I was watching, that further helps the magnitude of the chapter. From the wide open shots of the high-rise buildings, to the size of the aforementioned explosion, and later on, with the shot of the densely packed station, it's just top stuff there on the design team. No wonder we had to take a longer than usual mid-season break for the production team. It's also kind of funny that in an episode that's bound to be remembered for more of its darker edges, there were some nice positive moments too, like the reunions, which I always appreciate as this does help the viewer find time to breathe in between all the heavier content. And while Ironwood's breakdown is definitely the surefire main event, it's partnered up just as well with the equally compelling and exciting shift in direction for Cinder, as she finally gets the clarity on her faults that she needed, not just for the sake of her own goals, but also for her character, to try and finally shake off some of the damning flaws to her. And need I say more about just how much I love the closing scene? While I know some have felt it borders on making Ironwood come off as cartoonishly evil, I can't help but find Ironwood's venting in his office, the chilling subtlety to his disconnection to morality, and his piercingly calculated and cold ultimatum is the picture-perfect payoff to his long burn heel turn teasing that I was hoping to see, and I'm thoroughly excited to see where this leads next for Atlas's fate and his own, as it's pushed even closer to falling off the edge in dramatic, beautifully haunting fashion. Episode award time then, and obviously the ultimatum is the scene of the episode for all the reasons I just shared. Though the Cinder Roast could have also won this easily too if not for its tough competition. Character of the episode? I'm actually going to be quite caught on because, like I said, Cinder and Ironwood both have outstanding scenes striking at their core and pushing them into new ground that I'm super eager to see unfold. So I think for this, they're gonna share the award, as I can't really pick an outright winner. And finally, the voice acting gold star has to go to Jason Rose, though Christopher Sabat had probably his best performance since Gravity. Love how hard-hitting he delivered his tear-down barbs as Cinder, but Jason earned this just barely for not only how well he remained intimidating while sounding emotionless, but also because I love just how he gave two equally uncomfortable small chuckles in the same scene, but gave them enough differences in the deliveries to help you pinpoint when he still has his heart and when he's gone full tyrant and casted it aside. So yeah, what an episode. Perhaps this volume's answer to Gravity, as the episode that redirects the narrative to a shocking outcome, was being thoroughly entertaining to boot. This chapter brought out so much emotion in me, both positive and negative, that it's earned itself high praise as one of this series' finest chapters. Just when perhaps you would wonder just how far the RWBY can maintain its suspenseful aura and high quality set pieces, it takes a turn that revitalizes the engine, kicks it into high gear, and has a sense speeding off into what looks to be another massive explosion, just like how it kicked off. And I say, bring it on. But what about you guys? Did you like this chapter as much as I did? What's your current feelings now on Ironwood and Cinder? Was now the time for a Bumblebee kiss in your opinion? And do you think Atlas is doomed to fall? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.